I saw the blood before I saw the man. It was smeared across the handle of the diner's back door like a warning I was too tired to heed. Most people in this part of Seoul knew to look away when things got messy, but my mother always said that a closed heart is a heavy one. I stepped into the alley, the cold night air biting at my skin. There he was. He was slumped against a stack of crates, his expensive wool coat soaked in a deep, terrifying crimson. He didn't look like a beggar. Even half-conscious, he looked like someone who was used to giving orders, not asking for help. His breathing was shallow, a ragged sound that tore through the silence of the empty street. When I knelt beside him, his hand flew up, gripping my wrist with a strength that didn't match his fading pulse. His eyes were dark, sharp, and filled with a lethal suspicion. "Don't," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "Go away." I didn't move. I looked at the wound in his side, and then back at his face. I knew helping him was a mistake. I just didn't know how big of a mistake it would be. Would you risk your life to save a stranger who clearly belongs to a dangerous world? If you're enjoying this journey into the shadows of Seoul, please hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more of these emotional stories to life. The man's grip on my wrist didn't loosen, but his eyes began to roll back. He was slipping away. I looked toward the end of the alley. If I called the police, he might die before they arrived. Or worse, they might be the ones he was running from. I made a choice that defied every bit of common sense I possessed. I hooked his arm over my shoulder, groaning under his weight. He was heavy, a solid mass of muscle and silent secrets. I managed to guide him through the back entrance of my small apartment building, praying the elderly neighbors were already asleep. Every step felt like a mile. The scent of expensive cologne and iron-rich blood filled my senses. Inside my tiny studio, I lowered him onto the old sofa. He groaned, his head lolling back. I rushed to get my first aid kit, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't a doctor, but I'd seen enough back-home injuries to know he needed a stitch, and he needed it now. I cut away the fine fabric of his shirt, revealing a body mapped with scars. This man wasn't just a victim. He was a survivor of a war I couldn't imagine. I cleaned the wound as gently as I could. He woke up twice, once to grab my hand, and once to whisper a name I didn't recognize. "Min-kyu," he breathed, before fading back into the darkness of pain. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know who Min-kyu was, or why this man had a bullet graze across his ribs. I just focused on the needle and the thread. By 3 in the morning, his breathing had finally leveled out. I sat on the floor across from him, wrapped in a blanket, watching his chest rise and fall. In the soft light of my lamp, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone's son, someone's brother. I wondered what kind of life leads a man to bleed out in a diner alley. I must have drifted off, because I woke to the sound of a click. I opened my eyes to find him sitting up, his face pale but his gaze terrifyingly focused. He wasn't looking at me with gratitude. He was looking at me like I was a problem that needed to be solved. He reached into his coat and realized his weapon was gone. I had hidden it under the sink. He narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm the person who just saved your life," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. My hands were shaking, so I kept them behind the counter. "You were dying in my alley. I couldn't just leave you there to be picked up by the morning trash." He took the water I offered, his movements stiff and calculated. He drank it all in one go, never taking his eyes off me. He took in my small apartment, the framed photos of my family back in the States, the stacks of textbooks for my Korean language classes, the worn-out sneakers by the door. He was analyzing me, breaking me down into a list of risks and assets. "You should have left me," he said finally. His voice was low, devoid of emotion. "You don't know who I am. You don't know what you've invited into your home." "I know you're a man who was bleeding," I replied. That's all I needed to know. He looked at me then, a flicker of something. Was it surprise? Crossing his stoic features. He didn't say thank you. Men like him probably didn't know how. He just looked at his stitched side and then at the door. The morning sun began to peek through the blinds, casting long bars of light across the floor. The man, who I now knew as Han Jun Suk based on the ID I'd seen in his wallet while cleaning his coat, stood up slowly. He winced, but his face remained a mask of iron. He was determined to leave, even though he could barely stand. "I need my coat," he commanded. I handed it to him, cleaned of the worst stains but still damp. I also handed him his weapon, wrapped in a towel. He looked at the gun, then at me. Most people would have been terrified, but I just felt a strange sense of exhaustion. I had done my part. The rest was up to the universe. "If you go out there now, you'll just collapse again," I warned. He ignored me, sliding the gun into his waistband with practiced ease. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. "Forget you saw me," he said, without looking back. "If anyone asks, you saw nothing. You helped no one. For your own sake, Amara." He knew my name. He must have seen my mail on the table. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of cedarwood and the memory of his cold, dark eyes. Life returned to a fragile sort of normal. I went to my shifts at the diner, served coffee to tired office workers, and ignored the way my heart jumped every time the bell above the door chimed. I told myself it was over. I had been a good Samaritan, and the danger had walked out of my door. But the city felt different now. The shadows in the backstreets seemed longer. 2 days later, Detective Lee Sung-ho walked into the diner. He didn't order food. He showed me a photo of Jun Suk. "Have you seen this man?" he asked. His eyes were sharp, the eyes of a man who had spent decades looking for lies. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I remembered Jun Suk's warning. "I see a lot of people, Detective," I said, wiping the counter with a cloth. "Is he in trouble?" "He is trouble," Lee replied, leaning in. "That's Han Jun Suk. He's the head of a syndicate that's currently in the middle of a very violent internal power struggle. If you see him, don't be a hero. Call us. He isn't the type to appreciate kindness." I nodded, my heart pounding. I had saved the most dangerous man in Seoul, and the law was already knocking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Detective Lee's words. He isn't the type to appreciate kindness. Was I a fool? I had risked everything for a man who represented everything I stood against. My mother called me from home, her voice a soothing balm over my frayed nerves. She talked about the garden and the weather, unaware that her daughter was hiding secrets from the police. "Be careful, Amara," she said before hanging up. "The world is changing, and not everyone has a soul as bright as yours." I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't put her in danger. When I finished the call, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street from my apartment. It hadn't been there an hour ago. The windows were tinted, and the engine was idling silently. My breath caught. Was it the police? Or was it the people who had tried to kill Jun Suk? I turned off my lights and moved away from the window, sitting in the dark. I realized then that my act of mercy hadn't ended when he walked out the door. It had only just begun. The sedan stayed there for 3 nights. It didn't follow me, but it was always there when I got home. I felt like a bird under the gaze of a cat. On the 4th day, as I was leaving the diner after a double shift, a man stepped out of the shadows of the alley, the same alley where I'd found Jun Suk. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. "Miss Cole," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" I asked, clutching my bag tightly. "My name is Park Min-kyu," he said, bowing slightly. "I believe you looked after my employer recently." This was the man Jun Suk had whispered about in his fever. Min-kyu didn't look like a thug, he looked like a high-level executive. But his eyes were just as guarded as his boss's. "He's fine," I said, trying to push past him. He left. "I don't want any trouble." "You already have trouble," Min-kyu said calmly. "The people who did that to him are looking for anyone who might have helped him. We are here to ensure you remain undisturbed." He handed me a small, sleek burner phone. If you see anyone suspicious, press the only button on this. Do not call the police. I stared at the phone in my hand like it was a live grenade. I don't want your protection, I hissed. I just want my life back. Min-kyu looked at me with a touch of pity. Your life changed the moment you touched his blood, Amara. You showed mercy to a man who has none. In our world, that makes you either a saint or a target. We prefer to think of you as an investment. He walked away before I could argue. I stood in the cold alley, the burner phone heavy in my pocket. I felt a strange mixture of anger and fear. I hadn't asked for this. I had just tried to be a human being. Now I was an investment in a mafia war. When I got home, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a thick stack of cash, more money than I made in 6 months at the diner. There was no note. I knew it was from him. It wasn't a gift, it was a payment. It felt dirty. I put the money in a shoebox and shoved it to the very back of my closet. I didn't want his money. I wanted his absence. The next week was a blur of paranoia. Every customer who stayed too long at their table felt like a spy. Every car that slowed down near me felt like a threat. I went to the hospital to see Seo Hygiene, a nurse I'd befriended through the diner. She was older, wise, and had a way of seeing through people. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, Amara, Hygiene said as we shared a coffee in the break room. I did something, I whispered. I helped someone I shouldn't have. And now I'm scared. She took my hand. In this city, the line between good and bad isn't a wall, it's a fog. You did what your heart told you. That's never a mistake, even if the consequences are hard. Just remember, you don't owe anyone your soul. Her words stayed with me as I walked home. But as I reached my street, I saw that the black sedan was gone. In its place was a white van. 3 men were standing outside my apartment building. They weren't wearing suits. They looked hungry. They looked like the kind of men who enjoyed the internal power struggle Detective Lee had mentioned. I didn't think. I just turned and ran. I didn't go toward the main road. I ducked into the maze of side streets I'd come to know so well. I could hear footsteps behind me, heavy and fast. My lungs burned. I reached into my pocket and felt the burner phone. My finger hovered over the button. I hated the idea of calling him. I hated that I needed him. But as I turned a corner and hit a dead end, I realized I had no choice. I pressed the button. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't hear a ring. I just felt a vibration. I crouched behind a dumpster, holding my breath. The footsteps grew louder. She went this way. A voice shouted in Korean. I closed my eyes, praying. Suddenly, the sound of a screeching car filled the air. There was a dull thud, the sound of a struggle, and then silence. I waited, my heart hammering. Amara. It wasn't Min-kyu's voice. It was deeper, cooler. I looked up to see Han Jun Suk standing at the entrance of the alley. He looked fully recovered, dressed in a black suit that cost more than my entire education. He held out a hand to me. I didn't take his hand. I stood up on my own, brushing the dirt from my jeans. You brought them to my house, I said, my voice trembling with rage. You said I'd be safe if I forgot you. I tried to forget you. Jun Suk lowered his hand, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Min-kyu was standing over 2 men lying on the pavement. They weren't dead, but they weren't getting up anytime soon. I underestimated their desperation. Jun Suk said quietly. They thought you were a lever they could use against me. They were wrong. I am not a lever. I shouted. I am a person. I have a job and a mother, and a life that has nothing to do with your guns and your money. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming the small space. For a moment, the coldness in his eyes flickered, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. I know, he said. And that is why you are coming with me. Just for tonight. Until the rest of them are handled. I won't have your blood on my hands, Amara. Not after you washed mine off yours. We are halfway through Amara and Jun Suk's story. The tension is rising, and the worlds are colliding. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that changed your life forever? Let us know in the comments. I love reading your stories from all over the world. Now let's see if Amara can survive the night. He took me to a house hidden in the hills overlooking the city. It wasn't a mansion. It was a fortress of glass and steel, cold and lonely. Jun Suk didn't speak to me on the drive. He spent the entire time on his phone, barking orders in a language that sounded sharper and more dangerous than the one I heard at the diner. Once inside, he pointed to a guest room. "Stay here. Don't touch the windows. There are guards outside." "I'm a prisoner now?" I asked, crossing my arms. He stopped and turned to look at me. The moonlight through the window caught the sharp line of his jaw. "You are a guest. A prisoner cannot leave. You can leave, but you will die before you reach the gate. I am giving you the only thing I have to offer, time." He walked away, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I sat on the edge of the oversized bed, feeling small and out of place. I looked at my hands. They were still stained with the grime of the alley. I realized then that Jun Suk wasn't just protecting me from his enemies. He was protecting a part of himself that I had accidentally revived. The part that remembered what it felt like to be cared for by a stranger. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered out into the hallway. The house was silent, but it felt alive with tension. I found Jun Suk in a large study, sitting behind a desk covered in digital maps and documents. He wasn't looking at them. He was staring at a small object in his hand. As I drew closer, I realized it was the simple bandage wrapper I'd used on him that first night. He hadn't thrown it away. "Why did you do it?" he asked without looking up. "Why help a man who looked like a killer?" "Because you were a man who was hurting," I said softly. "I didn't see a killer. I saw a person." He finally looked at me, and for the first time he looked tired. In my world, mercy is a weakness. My father taught me that a leader who feels pity is a leader who is about to be replaced. I've lived my whole life by that rule, until I met you. "Mercy isn't weakness, Jun Suk," I said, stepping into the room. "It takes a lot more strength to forgive or to help than it does to strike. Anyone can pull a trigger. Very few can hold a hand." He went silent, processing my words. The air between us changed. It wasn't the tension of fear anymore. It was the tension of two souls trying to understand a language they didn't share. He stood up and walked toward me, stopping just inches away. I could feel the heat radiating from him. He reached out, his fingers hovering near my cheek before he pulled back, his knuckles whitening. "You should hate me," he whispered. "I don't hate you," I said. "I'm just disappointed that you think so little of yourself that you believe you don't deserve kindness." A phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the moment. It was Min-kyu. Jun Suk's face hardened instantly, the boss returning to the surface. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Understood. Secure the perimeter. I'm coming down." He looked at me one last time. "Kang Daeho is here. Stay in the room, Amara. No matter what you hear, do not come out." He didn't wait for a response. He grabbed his jacket and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. The sound started 10 minutes later. Not gunshots. Jun Suk was too smart for that, but the heavy, muffled sounds of a physical confrontation. Shouting, the breaking of glass, and the terrifying silence that followed each impact. I stayed in the room, my heart racing, but I couldn't just sit there. I opened the door an inch. The hallway was dark. I crept toward the stairs, my pulse thumping in my ears. I saw Min-kyu at the bottom of the stairs, his shirt torn, holding back two men. Further in the living area, I saw Jun Suk. He was facing a man older than him, heavier, with a cruel smile. This must be Kang Daeho. They weren't fighting, they were talking. Daeho was holding a folder, tossing it onto the table. "You're becoming soft, Jun Suk," Daeho laughed. "All this trouble for a foreign waitress? The elders are laughing at you. Give her to us, and we can end this tonight. You keep your territory, we keep our pride." I held my breath. My life was being bartered like a piece of land. I looked at Jun Suk, waiting for him to protect his empire. Jun Suk didn't look at the folder. He didn't even look at Daeho. He looked toward the stairs, and I realized he knew I was there. He knew I was listening. My pride isn't for sale, Jun Suk said, his voice cold as ice. And neither is she. You think I'm protecting her because I'm soft? You're wrong. I'm protecting her because she is the only thing in this city that isn't corrupt. If I let you touch her, I have nothing left worth leading. Then you've chosen your grave. He signaled to his men, but before they could move, Detective Lee Sung-ho stepped through the front door, followed by a dozen armed officers. The room flooded with blue and red light. Drop the weapons, Lee shouted. It was a setup. Jun Suk hadn't just been hiding me, he had been baiting them. He had used the internal struggle to lead the police right to Daeho's doorstep. But as the police moved in, Daeho pulled a hidden blade, lunging not at Jun Suk, but toward the stairs where I stood. Everything moved in slow motion. I saw the flash of the blade. I saw Jun Suk move, a blur of motion that defied his injuries. He didn't strike Daeho. He threw himself in front of me. The blade found its mark in his shoulder. He grunted, his weight slamming into me as we both fell back against the wall. The police swarmed Daeho, pinning him to the floor. Min-kyu was there a second later, his face frantic. Boss! Jun Suk was breathing hard, his hand gripping his shoulder. Blood was already seeping through his white shirt. He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine for any sign of injury. Are you okay? He panted. I'm fine, I sobbed, reaching out to pressure the wound. You idiot, why did you do that? You were already hurt. He leaned his head back against the wall, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I told you, I wasn't going to have your blood on my hands. The next few hours were a whirlwind. The police took statements, Daeho was hauled away in handcuffs, and an ambulance arrived for Jun Suk. Detective Lee looked at me with a complicated expression. You should have called me Miss Cole, he said, though there was no malice in his voice. But I suppose his way worked better. He's been feeding us information on Daeho for the last 48 hours. He cleaned his own house using us as the broom. Is he going to jail? I asked, looking toward the ambulance. For this? No. He's the victim tonight, Lee sighed. But his world is still his world. Be careful, Amara. People like him don't change overnight. I watched as they loaded Jun Suk into the ambulance. Before they closed the doors, he caught my eye. He didn't say anything, but the look he gave me wasn't the look of a mafia boss. It was the look of a man who had finally seen a glimpse of something better. A week passed. The news was full of the major Syndicate crackdown, though Jun Suk's name was suspiciously absent from the headlines. I went back to the diner. I needed the routine. I needed the noise of the coffee machine to drown out the silence of my apartment. One afternoon, Seo Hygiene, the nurse, came in. She handed me a small gift bag. A patient asked me to give this to you. He said he's being discharged today. Inside was a simple, handcrafted wooden bird. It was a traditional Korean symbol of peace and long life. There was no note, but I knew the craftsmanship. It was delicate, beautiful, and required immense patience to create. He's going away for a while, Hygiene said softly, to settle things. He told me to tell you that the alley is safe now. I held the bird tightly. I realized then that his mercy wasn't just about saving me. It was about saving himself from the cycle he was born into. He was leaving the violence behind, at least for now. The money in the shoebox was gone. I had donated it anonymously to the free clinic where Hygiene worked. It felt right. If that money had come from pain, it was now going toward healing. My mother called me that evening. You sound different, Amara. Lighter. I think I learned something, Mom, I said, looking at the wooden bird on my windowsill. I learned that even in the darkest places, there's a spark of something good. You just have to be brave enough to look for it. And did you find it? She asked. I did, I whispered. But it has to grow on its own now. I settled back into my life, But I kept the burner phone in my drawer. Not because I expected a call, but because it was a reminder that I wasn't powerless. I had changed the trajectory of a man's life just by holding a door open and refusing to look away. Months went by. Seoul turned from the humid heat of summer to the crisp, golden hues of autumn. I had finished my Korean certification and was looking into social work programs. I wanted to help people who were lost in the system, people like the ones I'd seen in the shadows. One evening, as I was closing the diner, a familiar black sedan pulled up. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't afraid. Min-kyu stepped out. He looked different. He was wearing a casual sweater instead of a suit. He looked relaxed. "Miss Cole," he said, bowing. "The chairman wanted me to give you this." He handed me an official-looking document. It was a scholarship in my name, fully funded for a master's degree in social work. "He says it's not a payment," Min-kyu explained. "It's an investment in the future you talked about. The one where people hold hands instead of pulling triggers." "Where is he?" I asked, my voice trembling. Min-kyu looked toward the mountains. He stepped down from the front lines. "He's living quietly now, handling the legal side of the family's businesses. He realized he couldn't lead the way he used to. Not after what happened." "Can I see him?" Min-kyu smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "He thought you might ask. He's at the park near the Han River. The one with the cherry blossoms." I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat and ran. The air was cool, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle like fallen stars. I found him sitting on a bench, looking out over the water. He wasn't surrounded by guards. He was just a man, sitting in the wind. I sat down beside him. He didn't look surprised. He just turned his head and gave me a soft, tired smile. He looked younger without the weight of the Syndicate on his shoulders. "The bird you gave me," I said. "It's beautiful." "It was the first thing I made with my hands that wasn't meant to hurt," Jun Suk said. "Thank you for the scholarship, Amara. But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said. "You gave me a life I didn't think I was allowed to have. This is just a small way of saying I'm trying to be worthy of the mercy you showed me." We sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't a silence of secrets or fear. It was the silence of two people who had survived a storm and were finally standing on solid ground. "What happens now?" I asked. Jun Suk looked at me, his dark eyes finally clear. "Now we live. No more alleys. No more hiding." He reached out, and this time he didn't pull back. He took my hand, his palm warm against mine. I looked at our joined hands. A waitress from a world away and a man who had walked through fire to find his soul. Our story hadn't started with a kiss or a promise. It had started with blood on a door handle and a choice to care. In a world that often demands we be cold to survive, we had chosen to be kind. And as the moon rose over the Han River, I realized that was the most powerful thing of all. Mercy is a choice that ripples through time. Amara saved Jun Suk's life, but in the end, her kindness saved his soul. Do you believe that everyone, no matter their past, deserves a second chance? If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that their light matters. Thank you for being part of our community. I'll see you in the next story.